gold trails and ghost towns. Share the adventures of our early pioneers as we explore the development of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. With your host, Mike Roberts, and historian Bill Barlee.
Welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts and Bill Barlee with you for the next half hour. And we go back to a place today we've done before, Dawson in the Yukon, the great gold rush of the Yukon, the Klondike Gold Rush. But we're going to tell some stories about some people we haven't touched on before.
We're going to tell about some characters that we have not really emphasized. We touched on one or two of them, but some of them we haven't mentioned at all. These are mainly the Gamblers of Dawson City from 1898 right to about 1900. Most of this information is in Klondike, P.R. Burton's book, which I consider his best book. I think it's well written, it's well researched, filled with drama. So we'll take a look at some of these absolutely fascinating characters. And the interesting thing is they came from all parts of the globe, all over North America, all over the world to get to Dawson City. They came via the White Pass. They came by the famous Chilkoot. They came downriver from Lake Lindeman. They came upriver from St. Michael's. They came from all over, all directions to get to Dawson.
Dawson was the gold capital of the world at this time.
At that particular juncture, it was the gold capital of the world and the most well-known gold town ever.
Population, you would say, be about what?
Oh, close to 30,000 at its height.
And these are 30,000 rambunctious, testosterone-obsessed individuals.
You bet. You bet. And what happened is, of course, the gamblers gravitated there because there was lots of gold, and the gold was so plentiful, it literally staggers the imagination.
Well, you told me once that they could leave bags of gold out on the street, and there was just so much of it, nobody'd touch it.
At first they could.
Oh.
But only at first. And there were pans of gold, gravel, that yielded 6 or 7 pounds of gold. Not ounces, but pounds of gold. Tom Lippy's claim, which was one of the great claims in the Yukon, yielded almost 5 tons of gold to him. 5 tons, and that was a 500-foot claim. So the gamblers were there to take their share and perhaps a little bit more.
Of course. Okay, this is going to be just a great show. I sense it, so don't go away. The Gamblers of Dawson when we come back. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts and Bill Barlee talking about the high rollers of Dawson in the Yukon, 1898 and thereabouts.
Yeah.
I mean, here we got Front Street in Dawson.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Population growing.
All the
Attitude
time.
Big.
People waiting to find some excitement. Well, the gamblers were only too prepared to give them a lot of excitement. And sometimes the gamblers gambled amongst themselves. Silent Sam Bonifield and the Montana Kid and Harry. They all gambled together one night a week, usually, trying to take money off each other. This was a real test of skill. And Harry Woolwich was an interesting guy, which we've never mentioned before, I don't think.
No, I don't remember.
Came out of Butte, Montana, had a great reputation there, Mike, because Butte, Montana was a high-rolling town. One of the, well, the most famous mining town in the United States, no doubt about it. He won $50,000 in a poker game there, $50,000 in gold coin, and lost it the same night. So then he drifts into Dawson City, prepared to take on one and all. He does very well some years and some months, and not so well. Then one day he had a hot streak, and he made $60,000 in the Monte Carlo. And here's a photo of the Monte Carlo, perhaps the most well-known gambling establishment on Front Street in Dawson in the late 1890s.
Now this building would be how big? I mean, how many people could it accommodate when one of these marathon or famous games was underway?
Hundreds of people, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, peeking over each other's shoulders. Yeah. No doubt about it. And Woolwich, of course, they thought he had the magic touch. Sometimes he gambled with his own money, sometimes he didn't. When he didn't, he was spending other people's money, but when he won, he took 50%. When he lost, it was their tough luck. So anyway, he makes $60,000, which is a lot of money. Multiply that by 40, $2.4 million. Decides to renounce gambling forever. He stands up and says, I've quit. This is it. I'm going outside, which means out to the United States.
I'm leaving this part of the world.
He rushes down and gets a stern-wheeler ticket. He's leaving on the next boat. He waits for the sternwheeler a little bit on edge. Sternwheeler is late. Ah, he says, no problem. I'll go back and flip a coin and tell him that, you know, this is the last coin I'm going to flip. So he takes a coin and he flips it and says heads or tails. He calls whatever it isn't, and that is, yeah, he would have called heads. It's tails. Well, he says, here, let's double or nothing on this. Let's double or nothing. It comes up.
Tails, he says. Heads it is.
Heads it
and he
is.
loses again.
That's right. And he does it again, and then he takes to the tables. And he decides to play poker with a variegated crew of individuals who are very, very sharp. And 24 hours later, he's still at the table with a very small, dwindling stack of gold coins. He loses that, and as a final gesture, he throws a sternwheeler ticket on the table and says, I may as well bet this too. He loses that. And Harry Woolridge is dead broke in 24 hours, losing $60,000, the equivalent of almost $2.5 million.
Well, did he ever recover? I mean, did he win big ever again, or was that it? Did he sort of shuffle off, beaten?
No, he never recouped as much as that. I mean, $60,000, a lot of money. And, you know, there were other individuals who were famous sometimes for one night. Certainly there was one individual that Pierre Burton mentions as One-Eyed Riley. And One-Eyed Riley was
doesn't sound like a lucky man to begin with, to my mind, no.
No, and he was a watchman for one of the transportation companies, and he got off work at midnight every night. And every night he would go in and gamble at faro. He thought faro was his game. Faro was not his game. He was a perennial loser. He never won at faro, but one night things changed around. He's in Silent Sam Bonifield's Bank Saloon. He goes in there and tries faro, and he wins. They up the limit. He wins again. They up it again. He wins and wins and wins and wins. By now, a crowd is gathering, and what a huge crowd, amazed at One-Eyed Riley actually winning. And he wins thousands and thousands of dollars, stops to take a supper break, goes down Front Street with literally hundreds of people following him, Mike, and drops into another gambling establishment, takes them to the cleaners. He does it again and again. Every establishment he stops at, he makes money. And they've increased the limit, every one of them. He has $30,000. He finally stops in at the famous Monte Carlo, and they put up a very, very shrewd card shark against him, a dealer, I should say, who handled faro extremely cleverly, and he takes about $2,000 of that $30,000, so he's down to $28,000. He stops and thinks $28,000? I can retire for life on this. He then steps outside, announces that he wants a dog puncher to go to Skagway. He will give him $1,000 in gold, which is a pretty good trip for that. And so he gives the dog puncher $1,000 in gold. He's got $27,000 left. He's going to catch the next
steamer to San Francisco, probably.
To San Francisco and get out of it. He goes down to Skagway. The steamer is late, unfortunately, as they quite often were. And he is inveigled into a small little dice game. The small dice game turns into a big dice game. He loses $27,000 and 3 passes of the dice.
Poor old One-Eyed Riley. You know, I wanted him to win. You know, I wanted him to survive.
He wanted to too.
But that was not to be. So that's a fair whack in the head now.
Yeah, it is.
Do all of these, you've got more stories. What's your next guy's?
Well, the next guy is an individual who is really quite a highly intelligent human being. He'd been a marshal in Helena, Montana. And Helena, Montana was old Last Chance Gulch in Montana at one time. And he was a guy called Pat Galvin. And Pat Galvin didn't want to be a king of the Bonanza. He didn't want to be a king of El Dorado. He had a marvelous claim on Bonanza Creek, and was one of the kings of the Klondike, no doubt about it, made hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now, he established a pattern early on.
Oh, I see. He just didn't want to be a single, famous for had the most gold. He wanted to have the most of everything.
He wanted an empire. And he proved this by going in. He would go into a saloon, and they said he was good for $2,000 a night in a saloon, because he would treat everybody in the saloon. When they couldn't take anymore, he'd call the bartenders and say, get them from outside. They'd come in flocking into the saloon. He'd treat them as well. And he used to carry around 3 or 4 or 5 pounds of nuggets in his pocket and dole it out to people he didn't even know.
Just to be a big shot.
Well, that's right, Mike, but fate steps in, and what happens is our Captain Willie Irving, who is an old captain from the Victoria area, is in the Yukon. He has a sternwheeler called the Yukoner, and he does some damage to it down at St. Michael's, which is the mouth of the Yukon River. and he wants to sell it. His price is $45,000.
Chance for this guy to now suddenly develop his empire.
That's right. This is the first step. So Pat Galvin comes in and he gives him $45,000. He loads the stern wheeler with all sorts of precious stuff, including a huge plate glass mirror. He hires a crew and gives them all gold pieces before they even do any work at all. They start up the Yukon. Luck would have it, the boiler blows. That stops the stern wheeler right now, and they have to repair it. A lot of damage is done. Then it gets frozen in the ice. That was 1898. By the way, his empire is now worth $7 million. He had received a bona fide offer for his holdings on Bonanza, for his holdings in Dawson City, for his stern wheeler line and the posts he'd established along the river. He turns it down flat.
If I can be worth 7, I could be worth 12.
That's right. He's going to become the unchallenged king of the Klondike. And so anyway, but it arrives in Dawson City in 1899. By then, Galvin is on the downhill slope, and things start to go bad. Of course, the head of the rush goes into Nome by 1900, and he starts losing things. The gold runs out on his claim. His establishments don't do well. His stern wheeler line doesn't do anything because there aren't as many people traveling into Dawson City. And frankly, within 12 months of being offered $7 million, Pat Galvin is absolutely dead broke, bankrupt.
He doesn't recover from that.
He never recovers from it, of course.
All right, now we've started slowly, but now we've got a guy lose $7 million in 12 months, but that's not the best you can do. We'll take a break here and come back in just a moment and tell you the story of the guy that we've been setting you up for, and we'll do that right after these words. Don't go away. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts and Bill Barlee telling you the story of some of the wonderful high rollers of Dawson, and with losers, astronomical losers like Woolrich and Riley and Galvin. They were not, despite the millions they lost, they were not at the pinnacle of disaster that our next guy is.
No, the pinnacle of disaster was Whitewater Bill Gates.
Whitewater Bill Gates.
Yeah. William Gates. It was his original name, and he gets the name Whitewater because he's washing dishes in Circle, Alaska. And he decides that he is going to make a name for himself and starts bragging about his boating experience on the Coeur d'Alene River in Idaho. And the Coeur d'Alene is silver country. He was only a boatman there, but they decide to christen him with the name Whitewater Bill. And he loves it. And he comes to Dawson looking around for a chance, and he does get the chance. Number 13 Eldorado, which everyone considers unlucky. They say there's no gold in number 13, it's an unlucky number, nobody picks it up. He goes to the owner, a guy called Hollingshead, and Hollingshead says, we will give you a lay on this ground. A layman's agreement is this, is that the miners who worked the ground usually got 50% of the gold obtained from that ground they worked. The other 50%, if the owner was lucky and the miners were honest, went to the owner. So they sank 6 holes. They're all barren. There's not any gold there at all, and they start to think 13 Eldorado is very unlucky indeed. And, you know, I mean, people worked in Eldorado. It was Bonanza Creek. It was marvelous gold. They sink one more hole, the seventh hole on Eldorado. They hit King Midas Hoard. They cave in the shaft, so nobody will know, probably including Hollingshead. And they say they're getting 10-cent pans. Well, that isn't much on that creek. So they make an offer to Hollingshead, $45,000. We'll give you $45,000. Hollingshead snaps at the offer. They then open up the shaft and proceed to follow the run, and they take out $45,000 in a few weeks. This transforms Swiftwater Bill Gates. He now is still 5 feet 5 inches tall. But he wears a top hat. That helps a little bit, puts another foot onto him. He wears a white shirt. He wears a starched collar and a Prince Albert coat. And he is a gambler. He isn't a drinker, which is interesting, but he tries everything. He tries faro. He tries blackjack. He tries poker. He tries roulette. And he loses at all of them, Mike.
But he doesn't care, because 13 Eldorado is producing gold like it never, unbelievable amounts.
And he starts his gambling in 1898, the fall of 1898. We have a good piece of paper which shows that he is actually quite prepared to gamble with considerable carelessness.
Now, this piece of paper is actually a check that he wrote.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't look like the checks you do, but it says Dawson City, 1898, and this says pay to the bearer the sum of $202 and some odd cents, signed Mr. Gates, W.M. Gates.
W.M. Gates. He never signed Swiftwater Bill.
That's right, that's that W.M.
But that's
right there.
over 1 pound of gold. Multiply that by 40 times as much, and you're getting about $8,000.
So
and
this check is worth $8,000 at that time.
In today's money,
value.
it would be. But even then, Mike, he would bet on the turn of a single card $7,000. That's $280,000 on the turn of a single card. Now, there were a lot of card mechanics in Dawson, so he did not do very well. and of course, the money starts to run out in 13 Eldorado, and he forms a partnership with a guy called Jack Smith, whom he'd known in Circle City. And they decide that they will go into partnership, and they will have a big establishment which he is going to call the Monte Carlo. We saw pictures of it in the program. And he makes a mistake. He sends Swiftwater Bill down to San Francisco. But before Swiftwater Bill went to San Francisco, he had fallen in love with, for probably the 100th time, with Gussie Lamour, who's a dance hall girl, 19 years old, as Pierre Burton said, a bit of a strumpet, but she's dancing and he thinks she's marvelous. He convinces her to marry him in San Francisco when he goes down there. So he goes down to San Francisco and is very lavish in his spending. She decides she won't marry him. And she won't marry him because essentially she's already married. And
that would be a big impediment.
She has a three-year-old child, and that's going to be difficult to get out of. So he goes down there, and so she throws him over, and he marries her sister. And her sister is several years younger. That marriage lasts 3 weeks. And then he marries the youngest, at least he then courts the youngest girl, Nellie Lamour, who is even younger yet. That doesn't go anywhere. But he's still spending money very lavishly. He's running out of money. He spots a doctor, Dr. Wolf, who is ready to invest in the Yukon. And of course, Swiftwater Bill Gates says he's the king of the Yukon, so Wolf gives him $20,000. Major mistake. And then Wolf watches him for a couple of days, and he's tipping the bellboys, and he's tipping the staff, and he's throwing that money around like crazy. So Wolf takes the next steamer up to the Yukon. And he goes into Dawson City, and he hears about the reputation of Swiftwater Bill Gates. He doesn't like what he hears, so he waits impatiently for Swiftwater Bill Gates to come back from San Francisco. He sees a flotilla coming down the river, and in the front of the flotilla is Swiftwater Bill Gates with his top hat and his Prince Albert jacket, and a bevy of absolute beauties from the dance halls of San Francisco, shouting rather naughty things to the men lining
the assembled horde,
lining the banks. And as soon as Bill steps onto the shore, Wolf has him by the neck. He says, "I want the $20,000 back immediately." Now, Swiftwater Bill Gates had promised him 100% interest in 90 days. The 90 days has passed, but he says, "Just give me my money back." He does. And Jack Smith also takes his money back, so that Bill Gates does not get any of the money that he got from his claim, because it's all gone into lavish spending in San Francisco and buying presents and losing money at gambling. So then he starts all over again. He goes into Alaska and stakes on Dexter Creek. And Dexter Creek, he makes some money on Dexter Creek. And this launches him again. He goes back and marries a 17-year-old in Seattle, but unfortunately, the 17-year-old was preceded by another 17-year-old prior to that.
So he found himself married to 2 people.
Yes,
unfortunately.
He has. And both mothers-in-law are very, very unhappy about this. And one of them collars him and puts him up and actually starts a case against him. He convinces her, after he's bribed the judge and the jury and the police and the detectives and everybody else with not any gold nuggets but $20 bills wrapped around them, and that he will go back to Alaska and make another find. She, amazingly, pawns her diamonds and lets him do that. He heads back for Alaska, he stakes Cleary Creek, and takes out $75,000 in the first run at it. And then he goes back, and of course the story repeats itself. He goes back to Cleary Creek, he takes hundreds of thousands of dollars, he falls in love with all sorts of other individuals, left, right, and center, and the story goes on until he leaves the Yukon and he leaves Alaska, and he's down on his luck, so he decides to trade continents. he goes to South America and he goes to Peru. There he convinces the government authorities this guy has a silver tongue. He said, I need a silver lease, a concession, what they call a concession. That means he has total control over a mining area. The mining area, as it happened, was 20 million acres, not 20,000 acres, not 2 million acres or 200,000 acres, but 20 million acres.
Of Peru.
Of
to
Peru.
do with, for free.
Of course.
To do with what he wants.
To mine silver. And this was silver country, right in the heart of the silver country, but he never achieves that last dream, Mike. In 1935, this irascible individual finally passes from the scene, but never to be forgotten in Dawson City.
I thought you might said he was killed by a paramour or something like that. No, that was not to be.
They didn't last.
What spectacular characters these are, and what bad planners. I mean, this must be heady stuff. People must just think about this with their jaws gaping.
Well, when you go over the list of the Klondike kings, and if you look at them through Pierre Berton's eyes and his research, excellently well done, you will see that probably 4 out of 5 at least did not keep their money. And that means the kings right down from Big Alex McDonald, right down to Lippy and all the others. They just didn't hang on to it. They weren't used to it, and they spent it lavishly. They thought the gold would never end. You
know what? I think to myself, who was the guy who took the money on the coin flip? We don't know his name. No. We only know the name of the guy who lost it. Listen, this is always a great, whenever you come around and there's gold nuggets in your pockets, I think this needs to be looked at here. This is a gold scale, and what we've carefully loaded on this side of the gold scale is just a massive handful of gold nuggets. Yeah. Okay? Now, so what we have to do, now what would be done when you take this into your neighborhood saloon to get money?
First of all, you would take troy weights. There's 4 ounces each of troy.
Yep.
Troy is different gold than avoirdupois. It's a different weighting system.
Right.
Troy weight per ounce is heavier. There's only 12 troy ounces and 1 troy pound.
Yep.
And there are 8 troy ounces, which today would be about $4,000 or $5,000. So there's $5,000 in gold, which Bill Gates and the others would lose on the turn of a card, and much more as well.
Oh, just phenomenal.
And when you look at that gold, Mike, as well, a good miner would take that out in 1 hour on the best creeks in the Yukon.
1 hour?
Yeah.
And some of the losers we talked about today got 5 tons of gold off their claim.
Tom Lippy was an example. He was not alone. Others got 2 tons, 3 tons, 4 tons. It was just absolutely staggering. Probably the richest ground in the world, with the exception of possibly the Urals and Russia, per cubic yard. It was just not the biggest rush. I mean, Australia was bigger, South Africa was bigger, California was bigger, but yard for yard, foot for foot, nothing really touched Dawson City and the Klondike.
Well, I'm glad you told me about these guys. There was Woolrich, there was Riley, One-Eyed Riley, there was Galvin, and there was Swiftwater, Bill Gates, and thank you very much for them all.
You're welcome.
Join us next time on Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Who knows where we'll go then?